times 7, depending on how your translation pulls that out. First off, we want to understand that we think Peter was, just looking for an area in which he could, how far he had to go to forgive his brothers. But in reality, Peter was actually going very far. In rabbinical teachings, the acceptable answer to this question was three times. And 3 is one of those common numbers that pops up as a completion number, and then 7 is perfect completion in many of the things that we see there. But so he's coming at it from 7 times. We're going farther than the rabbinical teaching, obviously, and then Jesus brings in much more. So when we look at this, he then begins to go into a parable. He says, "Therefore, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who wished to settle accounts with his servants. When he began to settle, one was brought to him who owed him 10,000 talents. And since he could not pay, his master ordered him to be sold with his wife and children and all that he had, and payment to be made. So the servant fell on his knees, imploring him, 'Have patience with me, and I will pay you everything.' And out of pity for him, the master of that servant released him and forgave him the debt. But when the same servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii, and seized him and began to choke him, saying, 'Pay what you owe.' So his fellow servant fell down and pleaded with him, 'Have patience with me, and I will pay you.' He refused and went and put him in prison until he could pay the debt. When his fellow servants saw what had taken place, they were greatly distressed, and they went and reported to their master all that had taken place. Then his master summoned him and said to him, 'You wicked servant, I forgave you all that debt because you pleaded with me, and should not you have had mercy on your fellow servant, as I had mercy on you?' And in anger the master delivered him to the jailers until he should pay all his debts. So also your heavenly Father will do to every one of you if you do not forgive your brother from your heart." In this, Peter brings out the question of forgiveness. What are we required to forgive? And Jesus comes from the perspective of how much have you been forgiven? So he brings in the equivalent of $6 billion being the first debt that is paid, or that is required. $6 billion is the rough equivalent here of 10,000 talents if we're trying to figure out in common day money. I don't know about you guys, but as far as I know, it's only like 17 people actually are billionaires in the world at this time. So when you think of somebody being able to give up $6 billion, this is not possible, even in today's economy, and especially not back then. So there's 2 different reactions given to this slave, one before and one after. The first is, hey, you can't pay, so therefore I'm going to sell you and everyone else that you know that is associated with you that I own, and you will pay the debt from being sold. If you look at the response later on, he is no longer sold at the end. He is given the same response that he gives those around him. So, first, his sentence is, you are to be sold. And he begs for mercy, and he is given mercy. But then he goes and he says, hey, I need the money. I want to gain what I did not have, what I was not capable of doing before, so I'll take it from someone else. And he throws that servant in prison. What the king then does in response is he does not sell the servant, as he suggested beforehand. His first suggestion was sell him and get the debt. But then he says he threw him to the jailers. So he did exactly as the servant did to the opposite servant when he did not show mercy. And in yet that we see mercy given from the master. Because the master had the ability to sell him and give him over. But he had already told the servant that he wasn't going to do that. He had already given the servant a promise that he would not sell him and be rid of him. But he gives the servant a new understanding of what he has done to his fellow servant. And he calls us afterwards, tells us that, so the Heavenly Father will do to every one of you if you do not forgive your brothers. No, he's not saying that you are no longer able to enter the kingdom of heaven, but God is going to police his children. God is going to make sure that when you do not forgive, you will not be in the favor and merit and mercy of others around you. And you will be shown in kind of what you have done to call attention to who you have represented yourself to be, not a child of the kingdom. Tonight we're coming before the Lord's Supper. We have a command to drop whatever we're doing here and to go and resolve the conflicts that we have. Because that is our reaction to those around us is extremely important to God. Let's go before the Lord with